If you're renting in Spain for the first time, this video is for you. It can feel like a minefield, contracts in legal Spanish, agencies with hidden fees, but don't worry. Today I'll walk you through everything you need to know, how to sign a rental contract, what to watch out for, and how to leave without losing your deposit. Hi, my name is Tali, I'm British Irish and I've been living in Spain since 2022, and I've rented in both Barcelona and Madrid. Along the way I've spoken with lawyers, made some mistakes, and figured out the process so you don't have to. This video should be helpful for anyone who's looking to rent in Spain, whether you're an expat, a student, a digital nomad, or even a long-term resident. Okay, so how do you actually start looking for a place in Spain? Most people use Idealista or Fotocasa. Spot a Home is also quite good. And don't underestimate the power of word of mouth, Facebook groups. These are all very helpful. But I will preface this whole video with do not fall for rental scams. Never ever pay anything upfront before seeing the place, or at least having a verified contract draft. If someone pushes you to send money before visiting a property, it's a red flag. Do not do it. Okay, now we've got that out of the way, some helpful tips to know before you get into these discussions. In Spain since 2023, landlords, not tenants, have to pay the estate agent realtor commissions and fees. You'll also be asked ahead of time for a bunch of documents. These usually include your NIE, so your foreigner's ID number, a work contract, pay slips, maybe a bank guarantee or references. You'll also need an EU bank account to pay your deposit and to show proof of funds. This tripped me up at the beginning because I was showing proof of funds in pounds in a UK bank. But since we had that lovely thing called Brexit, that didn't count for anything. So I had to open a bank account here and transfer all the money into an EU bank account for my funds to be considered. So the normal costs that they ask for up front are 1 month's deposit, which is called the fianza. And sometimes you'll be asked for an extra month or months guarantee, depending on how risky you look to the landlord. When I first moved here, I had no Spanish work history and just a job offer, so I had to put down several months plus get a guarantor. But now, after 3 years of working here, of steady employment and filing my tax returns, it's only 1 month. Okay, so you have a draft rental contract in your hand, but how do you understand this? Now, probably the first thing that's going to give you a jump scare is it's going to say it's for 5 or 7 years. Don't worry, this doesn't mean you're locked in a lease for 5 or 7 years. In Spain, contracts run for a minimum of 5 years if your landlord is a person and 7 years if your landlord is a company. It just means that each year your contract will be auto-renewed unless you give your notice. This in Spanish will be on the contract as años prorrogables. The law forces this contract to auto-renew for up to the 5 or 7 years unless you as the tenant choose to leave. So in the end, it's there to protect you. Okay, you may see a clause as well about your rent increasing. So usually this is linked to inflation. In 2025, the official index rate for Spain for inflation was 2.2%. Now, this is often referred to as the IRAV. This is a maximum cap. It's not a guaranteed increase. It just means that they can't raise your rent more than that percentage given by the government. Also, you'll see a part about repairs and maintenance. Just know that here in Spain, the landlord covers major repairs to keep the property habitable, and tenants need to cover small fixes, which are usually related to wear and tear. Now, you might not be renting alone. You might have roommates. You might think about subletting. Generally, this is prohibited in contracts, but it's not automatically illegal. You just need to check what your contract says. Okay, probably the most interesting part of the contract as well is that of termination and early termination. So after 6 months, typically you can leave with 30 days notice and no penalties. But some contracts will allow the landlord to apply penalties if it's written in. So typically the rule of thumb is leaving before 6 months, there will be a penalty. It will be written in the contract. Leaving after, they can't apply any. You may also see a clause about something called IBI and gastos comunes. Now, IBI is almost like council tax in the UK. It's a tax on properties. And gastos comunes is like if you live in a building that has a pool or a concierge, this typically goes towards maintaining the cost of those facilities. Usually these are paid by the landlord, but just check your contract. Sometimes they might even have promotions written in, like for the first 2 years. If you're a good tenant, pay your rent on time, you don't need to pay for these additional items. At the end of the contract as well, if anything comes with the apartment, like, a built-in dishwasher, microwave, a washer, any white goods at all, these will be in a part at the end which is called the inventory. If an item is listed on this inventory, it is the landlord's obligation to replace it if it breaks. If it's not listed in this inventory, it's just a courtesy item. So let's say there's a washer in the apartment, but it doesn't appear on this inventory. If that washer breaks, you can't go to the landlord and ask them to fix it because it was never there on paper. However, if it was on the inventory, you are well within your rights to ask the landlord to fix this in a reasonable time frame. Also, I know for a lot of people there's a language barrier issue here with a contract, so always ask for a draft of it or a template in writing and translate it before signing anything. Personally, I always pay a lawyer. It cost me €75 in 2025 to have a lawyer review a contract, and I think it's worth every cent. Okay, now you've got that out of the way and you're actually in your apartment, what to be aware of during the rental. So the first thing you'll need to do is change the utility bills into your name. This is called cambio de titular. Sometimes the agent can help, otherwise you'll need the most recent bill from the previous tenants to set it up with providers. Then with your rental contract, you will need to do something called empadronar, or the empadronamiento. This is a legal requirement in Spain. It means registering yourself at the town hall. This is super important to have access to healthcare, to schools, for any residency paperwork. It is one of the basic requirements. Also, if something breaks during your tenancy, send written notice to your landlord, ideally by email or WhatsApp, and keep proof because that paper trail may matter later if they don't fix it quickly. Okay, so after a few happy years, you're now looking to get out of your contract and leave. Maybe you need to move, maybe you're going back to your home country, who knows? But ending the contract can usually be where a lot of people encounter problems, like myself. That's when I needed a lawyer for some advice. You must give written notice and at least 30 days, and only after 6 months have gone by. As I mentioned earlier, if you do leave earlier than 6 months, there may be penalties, and that comes straight from the law of urban rentals in Spain. You hand back the keys, the landlord inspects the place, and ideally, your deposit, the fianza, should be held by the regional government. So for example, in Catalonia, this is called Incasol, and in Madrid, it's called Ivima, and that's where landlords need to hold your deposit during the whole rental. Legally, this should be returned to you within 30 days. That's if there's no damage or unpaid bills. The 30-day rule exists in most regions of Spain, but not all of them. Some regions do just say promptly, so I would double check that depending on where you are. Common landlord tricks for not giving you your full deposit back means usually trying to charge you for normal wear and tear or unnecessary cleaning. Remember, you're only responsible for reasonable use, not making the place look brand new. If they don't return your deposit, you can send what's called a burofax, which is an official legal letter, and even take them to the small claims court. Although thankfully that's never happened to me, so I can't share any advice on how you would do that, but I'm sure there's other videos you can see. In that case though, I would definitely get a lawyer. So a few extra tips and random factoids. Always take photos and videos of everything at move-in and at move-out. I would always pay your rent via bank transfer, so there's a clear paper trail. Just be aware that housing law can differ by region. Madrid, Catalonia, Andalusia, they all have their nuances. Usually if you're living in an old building, you will have a gas boiler, so as a tenant you must arrange an annual inspection for that. This means just checking it works properly, that it's safe, and this is a legal requirement in most regions of Spain, but the frequency may vary, whether it's 1 to 2 years based on where you are. Well, that's it. Renting in Spain isn't always easy, but if you know your rights and prepare well, you can avoid the horror stories. The good news is that Spanish law usually is interpreted in favour of the tenant, and you can always refer back to the law of urban rentals, the LAW. Thanks for watching. If this was helpful, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe if you want to see more videos about expat life in Spain. Bye guys!